John, I will leave it to you then to make the impossible selection for who is your number one player, tier one, number one for you, John.
God, this was such a challenge.
All right, welcome on to a belated top 10 prospects in the NBA this season. We usually do this in December, which is a little bit more fun to get super excited about some of the rookies, but I can't say my excitement over any of this rookie class is diminished in the intervening month. So we got a lot to talk about here. The way we do this is we're going to take the top 23 or top players in the NBA, 23 and under, and basically decide who we would rather have on our team for the rest of their career. That's the criteria. And so the reason we chose 23 is because that's basically the last year can be like, and he's doing this, and he's only 23. Amazing. Hey, the sky's the limit for this guy. Once he's 24, obviously they have no further potential, right? Like Denny Avdia, for example, just no improvement at 24.
They just completely stop in their tracks.
So that's our universe. That was John Hollinger, who just heard. Danny Leroux joining us for one of our 3-man pods that we like to do. The other one being top 10 players in the NBA later on in March or so. So let's get rolling here. Danny, when you think about this, what kinds of things are you considering in terms of, because it's not only about what these guys are doing now, it's about a bunch of other factors, how you project what they're going to do into the future.
It's a lot of different things. And for me, you could start with the basics of, does this player have best player in the league, best player in the playoff series equity? Is that something that they could do? And how likely is that? Because it's not, having the potential for it, but how likely of a chance they have. And that's a key differentiator, especially at the higher echelons. And then the other kind of key components that I like to think about is, what kind of player, what roles does this player fill in the better versions of themselves, what they could do? Because the fun thing about prospects is we're not saying what they are now, it's what they could be, what they will be. And then the other is, well, what if that doesn't? What if they aren't that, the 80th percentile outcome or better? How does that player fit in on a successful team, on an unsuccessful team? And because those are really interesting, because especially when you move down the echelon of what a player could be, sometimes that becomes a more limited player, that becomes somebody who's less helpful to a good team. And so that starts to become really interesting. And so you'll have some very unfinished players on these lists. You'll have some that are, at least we have a cleaner idea of what they will be. And so it's always hard to reconcile all those things, but that's what I'm looking for.
John, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two key things for me are, one, kind of projecting ahead. What can this be at 20? Guy be at 25, 26, 27? And in particular, what can this guy be on an elite team? Because we're all about winning at the highest levels, right? So I care less about floor than about ceiling in this exercise.
Yeah, and I think that's something that could definitely burn you, but also I think a lot of people might be surprised. We'll see how our picks match. I think we actually may get a decent amount of disagreement this year, which would be fascinating. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I lead into that with a little bit of a preamble here? Is that something I found interesting? So I deliberately don't look at my top prospects from a year before until I've finished at least a preliminary ranking for the current year. My tiers went down to 12 last year. 7 of my top 12 are players who have graduated out, that are now age 24. And so what that means is you could call it a power vacuum in this, and part of that is due to the weakness of the 2024 draft class, and some of it is guys have gotten better and everything else like that. But so it was a very different exercise, because there just aren't that many players who are established commodities at a high level that I'm really excited about. So it is more of the potential guys, and that's why I think we could have some more disagreements here. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, a few of the guys who aged out: Anthony Edwards, Jalen Williams, Evan Mobley, Franz Wagner, Scotty Barnes, LaMelo Ball, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Johnson. So those guys were all in my top 12 a year ago. So yeah, we do have a really good draft in 2025 of guys who are hopefully going to come in and fill some of those spots. But it definitely is not, in terms of just what the current production is that's happening right now, not nearly as deep of a group as it was the year before. So one other thing that I'll add as well is just a general preamble is, I think position really matters. wings, you can always play wings with more wing. Everybody always wants more wings. Whereas point guard, center, we're finding again on this trade market that, if you have a point guard, you don't need another point guard. You have a center, maybe you need another center, but not if the guy's really good, then you don't. And so that's going to be something that I'm going to be keeping in mind a lot. And then just some of the changes in the game that we're seeing too, with just more physicality, more pressure, more offensive rebounding, the rules that allow you to take more steps, shove guys out of the way on drives, one-on-one driving, one-on-one defense is becoming ever more important. And I think you can look at some of the guys who have all ranked very highly at times on this list: Trae Young, LaMelo Ball, Ja Morant, and what their current trade value is. Now, those guys aren't playing as well as maybe they did in the past, but also you can see that those guys are not particularly in demand right now, and they're not necessarily guys who can be the centerpiece of a winning team, maybe in the way that they could have 5 years ago due to some of these changes in the game. So all that said, John, I will leave it to you then to make the impossible selection for who is your number one player, tier one, number one for you, John.
God, this was such a challenge. It's Victor.
Yeah, I assume, Danny, I did. Did you also have him as tier one, in his own tier, number one overall?
Absolutely. And there isn't even that much hesitation. No disrespect to some of the players who are below him on the list. But Wembanyama, it's partially about what he has already done. I believe he is already at 22, the best defensive player in the NBA when he's actually available to play. And he has grown offensively. It's interesting. Wembanyama, his just pure field goal percentage it's gone up significantly this year, despite him taking fewer threes and making less of his twos. And the reason why is because he's taking a higher proportion of his twos. He makes more of those, and because he's getting to the line a lot. And so Wembanyama, he's not there's still a lot more room for him to grow as an offensive player. And there's a lot more room for him to grow because he's preposterous as a defensive player. And so to me, he would be tier one, number one by himself, even if we were doing this on what they are right now. But when you factor in how much more he could do, he's the guy who really, to me, has the most chance of winning MVPs, winning a lot of these type of things, and that matters a lot to me.
Yeah, John, what are your feelings on Victor Wembanyama and his development over the last year or so?
Yeah, I mean, he keeps taking steps forward, and I think one of the biggest things is the longer he goes without suffering a serious injury, the longer the more the injury concerns of somebody at that height kind of taper. Because the history of players this tall is when they fail, it's not because they suck, it's because they can't stay on the floor. And so just the fact that he's been able to stay on the floor, in addition to the progress he's made as a player, I think really bodes well. I know he has missed time, but it hasn't been with the types of things that, lower extremity injuries are really what you worry about with players of this size. The feet injuries, especially, and the knee injuries, and it just hasn't been anything like that for him.
Yeah, he definitely is playing right now at a top 5 MVP level. There's nobody else even close to being on an MVP ballot in this group. The Spurs have a 12.6 net rating when he's on the floor, 103 defensive rating when he's on the floor. He's just absolutely warping the shot chart for all of these teams that he's going up against. So, yeah, certainly I think the offense, as far as really being someone who's going to produce in the playoffs, we haven't seen it in the playoffs yet. There are certainly questions about it, and I'm not going to just for sure write in that he's going to be the best player in basketball. The injuries are still a concern, even though they're not the type of injuries that are really going to bother you. The fact is he has missed about more than half the games, I think, since we last did this. So that's something to keep in mind, and you're always just a little bit worried that something's going to happen to him. But yeah, there's just nobody else even close to him. I don't think we really need to even talk about it that much more. So do not, he can skip this analysis and go straight to top 10 players in the NBA.
Well, Nate, what would you give him as a development score?
Yes, that's a good point. So that's one of the things we want to do is 1 to 10. How well has he developed over the last year and a half? I'd say probably 5 or 6. He just was really good last year also. And I think it's been incremental improvement this season, but certainly he's fitting in with all these other good players, and it's been pretty solid. So yeah, but
I'd go higher than that.
Okay.
I think he's been much more able to play bully ball against smaller players, and that's a significant thing at his height because he can obviously just shoot over the top of anybody if he can take the hit. So I think that development in his lower body strength has been a pretty significant thing for him.
Okay.
I'll go with
So
the
I'm
7.
gonna go 7. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, and a 5 is not bad. I'm basically just saying he's on track, but I already thought he was going to be this type of player. He was kind of close to that last year, so I think he definitely has gotten better, but not in a way that's like so unexpected to me or anything like that. So I'm going to go second, and to me, Cooper Flagg was not only an obvious number 2, but also someone who's in his own tier as well. My second tier. What do y'all make of that? Was Cooper number 2 for you guys? And if so, was he in his own tier?
He was an easy number 2 for me in his own tier. Yes. I just think when you have to remember how young he still is. I mean, he reclassified up just to be a freshman at Duke. He should be a freshman right now. And so, and he's doing this at the NBA level. He's shown improvement even from the start of the season. So yeah, I think he's an easy call at number 2. Especially with all these guys that graduated out. I mean, our list is definitely a little softer than it was a year ago.
Yeah, if Anthony Edwards were still in this, I might say it would be pretty close because Edwards is continuing to play better. But he's 24 now. He's fully formed, not part of this analysis. Never going to take even a single iota of improvement. Danny, same for you, or do you had someone else in this group too?
It is the same for me, though I think I might have been closer to having somebody else in this tier, and I can mention now that that's Chet Holmgren, because I think there is a distinct chance. I don't think it's a probability. That's why they're in separate tiers. That Chet Holmgren becomes or stays whatever a better player than Cooper Flagg. Like Chet Holmgren, we'll talk about him soon enough. He's a monster, and he's a special player of the type that he is. But Cooper Flagg, it's been a weird kind of system for him with the Mavericks, and I think that it has not done him favors overall, but it has given us some film, especially some of these games against the Jazz and others, where he's more comfortable with the ball in his hands. He got all those pick and roll reps at Duke. Congrats to their coaching staff for doing that in a way that they didn't when Coach K was there. And so the idea that Cooper Flagg can be more of an on-ball guy while also still having the defensive chops, which that's another way he's gotten into service. I think he's a natural 4. He's played a lot of the 3, the 2, the 1 with the Dallas Mavericks. And so the idea that he could be, the guy that we've compared it to a couple points in time is Jason Tatum, but somebody who can have the ball in his hands a lot, maybe not be the alpha and the omega offensively, but see something like that. And then also be a true difference maker on the defensive end. That's an unusual combination. It's a special combination. And I don't think he'll be the set it and forget it defensive center like some of the other guys that'll be on my list are. But he can, the possibility, if not probability, that he can do a lot more than that is enough to put him over anybody else in a separate tier.
Yeah, I think he's fitting right into where the game is headed. Because I'd say the one thing that he is not awesome at and may never be awesome at is he's not just incredibly quick off the drill, but it's really become more about ball handling, power, footwork, size on rim attacks rather than just being able to break guys' ankles and blow by them. And so that he's perfectly able to fit into. His shot making from 2, I think, has gotten to be pretty good. He really struggled shooting the NBA 3 the first 2 months. I relatively discount that. He's a good free throw shooter. He's starting to come on with his 3-point shooting. He's starting to come on with his 2-point shooting off the dribble as well. And he's just able to get to the basket. And certainly I think he's going to be a very good transition player, especially when they get a better point guard next to him. And also on defense, he should be one of the better rim protectors of the power forward position. I think he hasn't been quite as good as I might have hoped as a defender so far, but I still think that potential is absolutely there. So to me, he's been way better as a scorer when they've actually put him in a position to succeed than I would have thought. He's had all these crazy games like that 18-year-olds have never had as in the last month or so. So I just think he's going to be really good. I think he is someone who, especially when you consider, again, as John noted, his age, I thought maybe he would be more a type of guy who maybe is a secondary offensive player. I think he's shown enough to believe he could be a primary offensive player if things break right because of his ability to attack the basket in the half court. So to me, he's actually ahead of where I thought he would be right now, even though the overall efficiency numbers, the overall what number metrics haven't been great because the Mavs have just been such a weird situation. But I don't think he's not like a Paolo type where like his feel for the game and competitiveness is going to be in question. I think you can say that he's going to develop into a winning player. And then some of the individual stuff has been really good. So yeah, I think to me, I'm very excited about Cooper Flagg, even more so than when he was drafted.
About the only thing that's disappointed me on Cooper is I thought he'd be more of an event creator at the defensive end, and maybe he still gets there. But that was really, senior year in high school and freshman year at Duke. That was the thing that people really talked about with him, that he was almost like an Andre Kirilenko type defensive player. We haven't really seen that level of defensive impact yet.
Yeah, so, opponents shooting 64% against him at the rim. He's only contesting 18% of opponent shots, which is kind of a decent small forward, power forward type of number. He also hasn't been playing the 4 as much either, and they just generally had him playing smaller. So I think that stuff is going to come around, personally. What were you going to say, Danny?
I was just going to say that to my eye, when Flagg was, I didn't see as much of him in high school as I think some other people did, but at Duke, I think he's an event creator around the basket, but that he doesn't really have that as a perimeter player. Like Kirilenko's an interesting comp in that respect. I think of him more as like I'm trying to think of the right 4, but like a really disruptive 4. And that to me is the role, but we'll see. And I'm not going to, Cooper Flagg is so young, he just turned 19. There's a lot that he could end up being, but yeah, I think that this is a deserving spot for him. Should I go next? Because I've already said who my number 3 is.
Yeah. Go for it.
And so my number 3 is Chet Holmgren, and Holmgren is in some ways like there's an easy sales pitch for him, but I want to talk a little bit more than that. And the idea is that he is already one of the best defenders in the league, and especially the best available defender in the league, contesting about 35% of opponent shots, which is down significantly this year because of Isaiah Hartenstein. Opponents are below 50% or a little bit above 48% on the shots he contests. That is phenomenal. He is an integral part of the league's best defense, and they are meaningfully better when Chet Holmgren is on the floor than when he is off, despite having Hartenstein out there and Jay Will is a capable center as well. So that's all there. I don't want to discount that, because that is a big part of the sales pitch of why he's above everyone else, is that being the linchpin of a successful defense is something that I value a great deal. And I think Holmgren has already proven that he can do that on a high level team. He already did it on a championship team. But the reason why Holmgren he's different than some of the other guys who've been great defenders, is that I believe more in him as an offensive player. And it's probably always going to be a lower usage guy. Like, he's at 27% total creation this year. That is well below even like Alex Sarr, but Sarr has the ball in his hands too much because the Wizards don't have guys. But Chet Holmgren, I trust him as overall, not every possession, as a 3-point shooter, and he's getting more comfortable with the ball in his hands. And so the idea is that Holmgren, going back, I oftentimes, for these defensively dominant centers, I think about Rudy Gobert, because Gobert is one of those for the Dunked On era, a quintessential example. Chet Holmgren is much more developed already at 23, with the ball in his hands. And I think there's a lot of room to grow for him. I don't think he's ever going to be an on-ball star, but the combination of elite defensive player, a little bit more versatile defensively than some other 5s, because he's playing power forward a fair amount for the Thunder, that puts him in a separate group than somebody like, for me, as much as I appreciate him, of somebody like Alperen Sengun.
Yeah, new listeners, by the way, some of the stats we're throwing out there are total creation stat, is the percentage of your team's possessions that you either shoot, throw a pass that leads to a shot, or turn it over. So the highest guys in the league in terms of total creation are usually around 50%. A high passing creation, which is just the passing component of that, is 20%, would be about the league leader. And so Chet, not really much. The passing component actually has probably been the one thing that's maybe been a little disappointing for him as a prospect, but he's just a really efficient scorer as well. And he does stretch the floor. He can play the 4 or the 5. His rebounding has gotten better this year. John, what was your take on Chet Holmgren?
He was number 3 for me in a tier by himself. You guys covered a lot of it. I'd say the one weakness you haven't really talked about is because of his skinny frame. When he has to play 5 without another big, he gets fucking trucked on the glass. So that's probably one.
Yeah.
Like,
he's gotten a little better there, but yeah. And he also, I'd say the other thing too is he can't really guard in the post against like a Jokic or some other or even someone like Alperen
Sengun. Yeah.
Sengun. Right.
Yes.
So he does have to kind of play in an off-ball role, and you do need a center next to him, but those guys are plentifully available as well.
Yeah.
So, and then if you're not going up against that sort of player, he's fine playing center as well. So, sorry. What else do you have, John?
And even though he's missed time with injuries, in between, he played all 82 games in his second season, and he's played 33 this year. So I think his track record is when he doesn't have a broken bone, he doesn't get the other stuff that knocks people out of the lineup. I think he offensively can be a lot of different roles on a good team. And so that makes him very useful as we see in Oklahoma City, and can toggle between 4 and 5 because of his ability to play on the perimeter. And I think that makes him really useful. The other intangible thing with him, like, he gives a shit. Like, he is his own worst critic. Like, he's a guy I'd bank on to keep on improving and getting better and working on his weaknesses as he grows.
Yeah, I had Holmgren number 3 as well, but I also actually had Alperen Sengun in the same tier with him.
Mm-hmm.
And Danny, you and I have disagreed some on Sengun because he just hasn't been that efficient as an offensive player. He's basically right at the league average in true shooting, and the center league average is like 4 points above that. So he's ineffective for a center in terms of his efficiency, but he's just creating a lot of shots. His passing creation, 14%. He's basically the second best passing center in the league now, behind Jokic. He's even has the ability now to operate off the dribble in the half court, even be the ball handler in pick and roll. So he's running a lot of what Houston is doing. And then he also is a force on the offensive glass as well. And so it's not like he's taking a bunch of good shots and turning them into below average efficiency. If you look at his shot quality right now, our metric says that his shot quality is only a 50% field goal percentage, which is a pretty low number, particularly for a center. And he is adding value on top of that because he's taken a lot of tough floaters and hook shots, contested shots, in the 15-foot to 10-foot range. And I think he's also become a lot better on defense. He averages 1.5 steals per 36, which people always kind of forget to look at for a center, but that's actually pretty useful. And his rim protection numbers are usually pretty solid, especially because he's been part of some pretty good defenses the last couple of years. And he hasn't quite gotten as efficient this year as I would like, but he has taken a step forward in his skill level. I think the efficiency will come for him at some point, especially because he's only 23. Danny, why don't you respond to that? Because I think you've kind of been lower on Sengun. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you can react to what I was just saying there.
We're not too far apart on Sengun. He will be figure into my list pretty soon. And for Sengun, I mean, one of the big things that he has proven over the course of this year, is that he can be a part of a successful offense. When I look back at my notes from last year, I was like, the Rockets they're okay offensively. Like, he's important for their offense, but he's not elevated. Well, the Rockets have a 121 offensive rating when he's on the floor, and that drops a little bit, but it does drop when Sengun is off. He is generating harder shots, and it's remarkable. You talked about that shot quality. Like, for a center to have a shot quality that's basically harder than almost anybody we're going to talk about on this list is pretty remarkable. You could say in a very narrow way that's kind of a demerit that he's not generating the other stuff, but he's also taking some threes now. I think he's shown some real progress there, getting closer to the Mendoza line. He's taking about 2.5 3-pointers per 36 minutes, making 32% of them. I think that could be, kind of the low end weapon at some point in the past. But the offensive development, I think that he's proven it more. I'm not going to say he's like way, way, way better, but he's established some better teammates and all that kind of stuff. So I'm more confident in it than I was before. The thing with Sengun that's a real positive is that I don't think he is the reason why the Houston Rockets have a great defense. However, he is also not standing in the way of it nearly as much as most of the other elite offensive centers are.
Yeah.
And that is a huge positive. Like, that sounds like criticism. It is not in any way, because a lot of these guys, Jokic and Sabonis is even more egregious. Like, they're making it harder. And I think that Ime Udoka deserves a lot of credit for kind of scheming around some of Sengun's strengths and weaknesses, but he has enough strengths and small enough weaknesses that you can actually do that. And so for the Rockets to be successful defensively with him on the floor, so you have a center that's this good offensively that makes other guys better. And if they had, they're shooting a high percentage on threes, but if they had better shooters overall, you can maybe see that stuff sing even more. But they have this wonderful defense and everything else. So, like, I have Sengun in a tier below Chet Holmgren, but I mean, and if you were doing it solely based on what they were this season, they'd probably have them in the same tier. But because this is a larger exercise, I think there's more that Holmgren just fits in more schemes. And so one way to describe it is just Sengun is immensely valuable to the Rockets. And I think there are another, maybe 5 to 10 teams around the league where he would really help them more than Chet Holmgren, but especially on a lot of other teams that Holmgren's skill set just makes a lot of other things work a little bit better. But Sengun has earned his place in this part of the conversation.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up, Danny, because there's a little bit of like the trade conversation, like, where you fit on your team, but where do you fit on other teams? And having been in Memphis for so long, the thing that like with us, that Zach Randolph and Tony Allen fit our team and didn't fit very many other teams. Like there wasn't like people knocking down our door to trade for him, even though they were really valuable players for us, because they were just hard guys to fit on another team unless you had that exact same hole on your roster.
Yeah. Well, my counter to that would be, what if Sengun were playing with a great pick and roll point guard? Or what if he were playing with a good 4-out spacing, which he's never really had in his career? How much more efficient could he be if he were not having to be the one who's going to create so much on the offensive end? I think now defensively, he could struggle more, I think, somewhere else. That I think is where that argument is great. I think he actually, though, given the role that he's had the last couple of years, that he would actually be more efficient, if not necessarily more effective, somewhere else. So, John, I'll leave you to now. Was Sengun also your number 4 guy?
We should do development scores before.
Yes.
For Chet,
I'd say Sengun is like a 7, and Chet, kind of same thing, just continuing to make solid strides, but nothing totally revolutionary.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So Sengun, I had him 4th. I did not have him in his own tier. There was another guy I had him with, who I think is oddly similar in some ways. And we'll talk about in a minute. I think he's a good passer. I think he's a little bit of a YOLO passer, like Draymond a little bit. Like he's going to throw the pass, whether it's open or not, and creates a lot of turnovers that way. Not super efficient. We'll see if he started dipping into 3-point shooting a little more. We'll see if that can stick. He's not a great foul shooter. He's actually not that great a rebounder. The team is really awesome on the boards. I don't think Sengun himself is particularly that great. Defensively, like he's fine. Like remember, the knock on him in his draft year was that he was going to suck so bad on defense that it wouldn't be worth it to have him on the floor for his offense. Yeah. And he's completely blown that out the window.
All right. So who's your next guy, John?
My next guy is a good passer on a good team who has not been that efficient historically. And that is Paolo Banchero. And I think he and Sengun are oddly similar in some ways in those respects. Now, Paolo is not having as good a year. He's especially because of the 3-point shooting, which could be variance noise. But if he's just going to be a crap shooter his whole career, then I think it's going to be harder for him to maintain an all-star level. Like the 21-year-old version of Banchero, I think was clearly ahead of a couple of these other guys. And now he hasn't really made any progress the last 2 years. So the development score, you'd probably say would be lower, right? Probably like a 4 or something. Like we just haven't seen anything beyond his year 1 to year 2 jump to believe in him further. So, but there's still a lot of talent there, a lot of upside, especially. I mean, we're getting to a point where there's a pretty big drop off on the list where you're getting into more speculative guys. So I think Banchero is a pretty safe call for me at number 5.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I had him in this next group, but I think this year has been quite sobering for me as someone who is relatively an optimist on him. They still haven't put great shooting around him, but it's been better. And his on-off signature has been really bad his entire career. And my thought was it's the talent around him that's holding him back the first 3 years, and they're just loading up on him. That's why he's taking so many mid-rangers. But they've had more shooting around him at this point in time. Now, they haven't had their whole team together, to be sure, for very long, particularly with him available. He also had this groin issue, but usually guys, when healed from that should come back okay. And he really has been pretty bad. I think his body does not look good from the development standpoint. He is not nearly as explosive or as athletic, and he's only 23. Like, that shouldn't be happening yet, to where he's not getting these big dunks in transition the way that he used to. And he's not quite as sudden drawing fouls or going through guys. And there's a lot of, he comes down, he's got a one-on-one against the guy with the defense a little unset, and it's back to goal, try to back the guy down instead of crossover, go right through him, get fouled, or get all the way to the basket for a dunk. And then he also just plays extremely deliberately. And so I think he's going to need to start taking his conditioning more seriously, because that's fallen off a little bit. And then also he's going to need to just take playing in the team system more seriously as well. Just less holding the ball, move it quickly, attack quickly, use what will hopefully be the physical advantage that he seems to have lost a little bit, to go fast, more go and catches, more quick changes side of the floor, not just hold the ball for 5 seconds, wait for whoever is guarding or being guarded by the smallest guy on the other team to jog up and set a screen. So some of that's on Jamal Mosley, but I think more of it, honestly, is on him at this point in time. And I do think he has a resilient offensive game, in the sense that when he really gets going, he's hard to stop, and that could be more useful in the playoffs. But hey, he just has not been able to be an efficient scorer from the field at any point in his career, and it's time to start showing that. And so I do think that this season has to, and even the end of last season, has to make you feel like the upside isn't necessarily as likely to hit. I think that player is still in there, but at some point, this is going to be his last year on this list. He's got to be more productive than he's been.
I'll let John respond.
Have you noticed that he's shooting less this year? Like, they've kind of tilted the offense a lot toward Bane and Black.
Yeah, and that's without Franz.
That's without Franz, exactly. Yeah.
I'm concerned about Paolo Banchero. I mean, it is a small sample. He's only taken about 100 3-pointers on the year, but he's at 27% right now. And I worry that that's just not going to really ever be there. The best he's ever done is 34%. And that's only 1 year. He's been worse than that most of the other time. And for Banchero, like, we've talked about the offensive game, and I think that's the right place to focus. And one of my concerns with the diminished jump shooting is, well, what is he, if he's not the best offensive player on your team, what is he? And so he can be an opportunistic player, but if you don't have to, and you have to put a resource on him just because he's a physical guy, but it's a real challenge. Like, could you defend him with a center? All these sorts of things. And then the other part with Banchero, like, yes, wings, forward size guys are immensely valuable, but he's more, and he has been a part of successful defenses in the past. I don't think he's been the reason those teams, I don't think he's been like they've had to overcome him, but I don't think he's been the reason they needed strong defense at center. They've had a lot of other large human beings and all that sort of things. And so when you take Banchero out of his ecosystem and shook around, parts of it could be better. Like, they could have better spacing. They could have some better ball handlers, but I think a lot of it would actually be worse, because if he plays with a clearly better offensive player, like, how does he mesh in? Because, like, we see it also with, like, his kind of the mental makeup stuff. Like, John's right that he's taking fewer shots now, but he still kind of hasn't changed his mentality in terms of, like, you have these ones where he, like, dribbles into double or triple coverage and, like, doesn't make the pass. And so I'm pretty far, like, Paolo Banchero is on my list, at least for now, but he's not near where we're talking about here. First of all.
Yeah, I had him at 8. Although I still do have him in this group. I think at this point, there are no other established all-stars, right? Once you get below Sengun, Jalen Duren might make it this year. I'm sure we'll talk about him in a second.
That was the guy I was going to say. I was like,
so I have one more guy in the same tier as Sengun, but it is not an established all-star. And I feel like Nate might be a little mad that I have him way higher than he does, apparently. And that's Dylan Harper. And
no, he was my number 5. There's no anger whatsoever. I'm fully in control of my own list here.
I have Harper 4th, actually. I have him over Sengun.
Okay.
And the reason why is because one of the things that I value the most in terms of basketball is a player who can consistently generate good offense for himself and teammates. And even though Dylan Harper has not been efficient as an individual scorer this year, I trust what I saw in the film, and I trust what I've seen on the film on him with the Spurs, which is that he's a physical force, like, not in the same way as like Paolo Banchero, but like, he's quick. He plays with urgency, and he can get downhill. Some of his transition footage is great. And I haven't seen, and I think that there's some untapped stuff in terms of him potentially defensively and as a rebounder. And so it's fascinating because, like, part of this exercise is what are they now, but another part of it is what can they be. And so I've been burned on this before, and I acknowledge the possibility that this happens again. But I think Harper, has the tools to be an offensive engine, but he also has the tools to be an offensive engine that doesn't get totally abused on defense. And that is one of my favorite archetypes of player. And so he is not better than Alperen Sengun right now. There's a distinct chance that he never will be. But I think that what I expect Harper to be at age 25, 26, potentially even as early as 23, that is a special creator, a special lead creator for me.
Yeah, the reason I wouldn't have him above Sengun is I still am concerned about his outside game. I think his getting to the basket has been absolutely as advertised, maybe even better. He can finish with both hands. He's actually getting off the ground even a little bit better than I thought he was in college for some dunks. And he's able to get by basically anybody who's his size or smaller and get to the basket. And his finishing has been really solid for a guard. His contested finishing inside of 10 feet is 53% right now, which is league average. But for a rookie guard, that's awesome. But the shooting numbers are execrable right now. How much does that concern you about Harper, John?
I've seen him shoot like before games and at Rutgers and stuff, and I guess I feel like it's not that hard for him to get to the point where he's good enough, right? Like, what does he need to shoot to be a really?
Doesn't his jump shot have to be a weapon for him to be, really high echelon, right? Like, I actually think if he, maybe does he turn into a bigger version of kind of like De'Aaron Fox, or like what De'Aaron Fox was a couple of years ago, if the jump shot doesn't come around? Like I think if you're really talking about him being, a top 10 player in the NBA, which if we're having this level of prospect, you're kind of hoping you're getting there. And I love Harper. He's one of my favorite watches in the league. I'm just concerned that, like, is the jump shot really going to be like a plus? Because it needs to be a plus. He's a guard.
Yeah, I mean, that's the concern. I mean, it's times two, right? In the same city, because I mean, we're almost going to have, I think, an identical conversation coming up when we get to Castle, who I mean, I have Harper ahead of Castle because he's younger, so there's more time for his jump shot to get better. But it's the same conversation, right? Like, wow, these guys are really dynamic. They're killers in transition, and are they ever going to shoot?
Yeah, so I don't know. He kind of has this low release. I mean, yeah, I don't think his shot is like busted by any means. Like, I think he'll be able to make an open three, and maybe because he's such a good driver, he can pull up and make like an okay mid-ranger. Although, again, the release being lower, I think limits the upside of those, like him being a guy who can get to spots in the mid-range and have that be a major part of his game. And driving to the basket, that physically is a young man's game. Now, the other thing I really like about him is, I think he just knows how to play on both ends. He's a really good passer. He's a winner. He's a leader. He's going to keep working on his game. Like, the character stuff is off the charts with him. So I think all of that is stuff that I feel good that he's going to maximize whatever he can be. But a lot of this is just based on how crazy it could be if the jumper does become a weapon. I think there is I won't even say a substantial downside, but maybe he doesn't become an all-star just because he just doesn't shoot it well enough. Who else did you have in this group, John? You want to talk about Duren?
Yeah, I basically had 5 players here that I thought were pretty close to each other. Even though they're kind of different ages. Jalen Duren's really interesting. I mean, he's taken a big step forward this year, been a monster on the glass. Even though Detroit's been really good defensively, I'm not sure he individually is still that great, but he hasn't hurt them. It's kind of the Sengun, right? So that's something. I think he's a good passer, like better than his numbers kind of indicate. I've seen him do some really cool stuff. But he's become such a physical beast. Like, you have to play a real 5 against him, or you will get your ass kicked. So like he helps you just with that, because he's just going to dominate that matchup. Like he could just take guys one-on-one now. Some of the stuff he's done because he can really dribble too. Like some of the stuff he's done in that aspect has been really eye-opening this year.
Yeah, that's the thing that makes me most excited about him. How did you feel about Duren, Danny?
I have him in a large group, and he's definitely in that. I'm still open to moving guys. You could, as a collective, you're pretty persuasive. And with Duren, he's grown. He's also improved a lot, and that's something that I like in this. It's not just where did you start, but how have you gotten better? And so, playing a larger role, even if it's not through a jump shot in the team's offense, you're taking harder shots. I think he's doing well on that. And like John said, Duren, I don't think he's the reason the Pistons defense is successful, but he has been a part of a successful defense. And so that's a useful piece. Now, most teams will have weaker perimeter defenders than the Pistons do. And so part of this exercise is imagining them in a different situation. And so he's not as adept at cleaning up these messes as some other guys. And so that is a concern. So I think that Duren, like he's in this conversation, and it's so fascinating with this group. Mine is actually, so John said his is 5. I think mine, I haven't fully formed it, but I think it's like 9 guys, and it's just they're all interesting. They all have flaws, and so with Duren, it's like I said, he was in the All NBA conversation for the season so far. So yeah, he's definitely in this group, and maybe it's just the limitations of my imagination, but I wonder where it goes from here. I mean, players who have improved a lot, you generally think that they can again, but it could be a jump shot. It could be maybe that John brought up his passing. They can get a little bit more of an initiator, handoff game, that type of stuff. But so like, I think that he's going to be a good, but not great defender. I think that's just kind of where Duren's going to be considering his limitations. Like, I think that there are far worse places to be. But so it's just like, for me, it's this idea of like, okay, he's doing really well but can he reach higher heights than this? And maybe that's an unfair criticism because he's a better player right now than a lot of the other guys that I have in this tier. And the chances that they surpass him isn't always high. But a center who's not great defensively is just one of my fears, I guess you could say.
I don't believe he's going to be able to really shoot outside of 15 feet. He'll flash like a corner 3 and warm ups every once in a while. I just don't think that he's going to be that level of shooter, and not someone really who has a lot of post moves either. Very strong on duck-ins, get to the offensive glass, should be one of the best pick and roll finishers. But the 2 swing skills to me are, number one, this face up off the dribble game. Because if he can just take other centers off the dribble from the top of the key, like that's just really hard to defend.
Yeah.
Like, if you have to devote a second defender to that, that's really difficult. Or if you can play pick and roll, hit him on the short roll, and then he can make the play out of that, including just dribbling in and dunking on your head. So if you're really at the point where you're like running stuff through, and they've done a little more of that, there's been these flashes, but then there's also been a lot of games where he's kind of disappeared. And also, frankly, he's playing with the Sarr Thompson or Ron Holland or Javonte Green, other just kind of non-shooters as well, which makes his life a little bit more difficult. And if you could play with 4 shooters around him, I would love to see what that would look like at some point. And then the other thing is just his rim defense. Now, the Pistons are a pretty good rim defending team, but again, there's a lot of pieces around him. Isaiah Stewart is much better than him. Isaiah Stewart is awesome defensively. So there is, to me, a little bit of a drop off. His opponent field goal percentage numbers at the rim have never been amazing. They've gotten a lot better. His pick and roll defense has gotten a lot better. He can also switch some. But the most likely outcome seems to me to be like pretty darn good player on both ends and very efficient, but not necessarily someone you run someone through on offense, and not just, a top 5 defensive player in basketball on defense. But that's, again, that's a very valuable player, and maybe there is the upside there. What do you think, John, of Duren, the possibility of Duren breaking out of this, kind of rim running center and then rim protector mode to be more than that?
Well, 0 made threes in his career and has not attempted one since March of 2024. So I think we can write that possibility off. To me, if he can mash on post-ups or even turn post-ups into face-ups and get people off the dribble that way, almost like a David Robinson type game, I think that's where, like, if he could just be so good as a scorer. I mean, even right now, he's averaging 30 points per 100 possessions. and like doing it while shooting 63%. Like that's valuable. But if he can take that to an even higher level where it's like, shit, like we have to double him, then I think it takes his game to another level.
Yeah, just the question of whether you're truly running stuff through him is the one for me. Yeah, I mean, David Robinson is a very interesting comparison for him. Now, David Robinson is one of the best defensive players of all time. Came into the league fully formed at like 24. I don't think that Duren has that level of defensive instincts, but he's made big strides from where he was as a going into the league.
To be clear,
yeah.
To be clear, I was talking about David Robinson's face-up game from the post, where he would do a post-up and then he would just turn around and face the guy and beat him off the dribble.
Yeah, although he did at least have like a jump shot that he could shoot in that circumstance if it wasn't. But his Duren's free throw shooting 72%. Like, it's not horrible. Yeah. Maybe it could happen.
Yeah.
All right, Danny, I'll leave you the next nomination. You said you had a big group here coming up.
It is a big group, and so the most important thing, and this is part of why I had Dylan Harper high for me, is can you generate good shots? Can you convert good shots? And can you be that best offensive player? And so there are a couple of different guys that I think are bites at the apple. That if there was anyone I believed in more, they'd probably be higher on my list. But I think the next guy I want to talk about, which will be a high development score, considering how last year went for him, is Reed Sheppard. And Reed Sheppard still primarily coming off the bench for the Rockets. Hasn't even played 1,000 minutes yet this year. But part of why I've been very encouraged by Sheppard's 25-26 season so far is that it has reinforced some of what I really liked about him as a prospect. That he's the pick and roll numbers are looking better. He's making 41% of jumpers at a high volume, about 9 per 36 minutes now. And so Sheppard,
that's just 3-pointers, right?
3-pointers, yeah. Yeah, 3-pointers. He's 41%. He's overall this year 58% true shooting. And so Sheppard, it's not a sure thing. It's not a sure thing at all for him. I mean, like for any of these guys, but I think that he can be a part of a successful offense. And now can he be a part of it as the like lead guy? Like we've talked about total creation. He's only at about 28% right now. That is well below the higher heights, but he's a part of a successful offense. So if I had to bet, and we'll talk about some of the other guys that I have in this group, I still think with his tools, with his jumper, that I think is becoming more of a weapon. And he's an opportunistic defender, albeit at times an overrated one. I think he's my favorite bet on the board to be like a top 15 offensive player of anybody left.
Ooh, okay. What's your reaction on that, John?
I didn't quite have him on that level. Danny makes an interesting case for him. But there was another guy who I was more excited about.
The guy who's at like doing all the same things but way better at age 20 is having the best shooting rookie season of all time. That guy.
Yeah, him. We're talking about Kon Knueppel, obviously, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I just been really impressed by what he's done in Charlotte with like not even that much talent around him and like some pretty good on-ball shot creation too. He is strong. Like he just shoves guys off of him and then he stops and they keep going and he gets to a pull-up really easily. And he's kind of always had that in his game. So he's not just a guy who's running around shooting off of screens or whatever, even though he's really good at that too, obviously. I think he's just a really good all-around player. I don't think he's ever going to be defensive player of the year, but I don't think he's a massive liability there either. And, still like, again, doing this at a really young age, probably the biggest critique you would make is like, does he have the upside to be like the on-ball, shot creator, offensive engine that like a Harper or Castle could be if they hit? That's probably the one thing you would probably tag him with is kind of just maybe some ceiling concerns. But yeah, he was the next guy on my list. It was really hard for me to choose between him and Duren and Castle and Harper.
What is that? Was that your ringer right there?
That was a spam call to my phone. Yes. Exciting time.
What song is that that's on your ringer?
I don't even know. It's a default tone in the phone.
Default, the two greatest words in the English language. Yeah, so I'm sorry to hijack you on Sheppard, Dan. I think we'll get back to him, but Kon, to me, those two guys are pretty interesting comparisons, right? Sheppard, I had Sheppard lower as well, in a lower tier than Kon. And yes, you know what, Kon, I liked him a lot in the draft, but I had these upside concerns. And no, like what he's doing right now is just too good. Like, even if you might want to say, oh, you know, he's just some slow white dude, it's like just fucking producing. And he's producing at an unbelievable level. And like, this is, and we're not talking, he's having the best shooting rookie season by anyone. And there have been, you know, like 23-year-olds who come in that are supposed to be fully formed. Shooters usually take a while to adjust to the NBA line. Like, he's just absolute money. And while I think maybe part of the issue with Kon and why it's just a little harder to wrap your head around, other than he just looks like unathletic white guy, is, yeah, the strength is really important. I think on defense, the strength is important too. And then he just has so many different ways to attack. Like, he can attack out of pick and pop. He can attack off the dribble if you needed to him. He can pump fake and drive. He can be the ball handler in pick and roll. He can use his size in the mid range. He's a physical finisher. Even if he doesn't get off the ground, but he actually gets to the basket and finishes pretty well. So I think, yeah, maybe he's not going to be your number one offensive player, but I think he'd be an awesome number two. And he's going to just be really efficient and kill you in a bunch of different ways, and can interact with basically anybody else on the floor in any way. The Hornets do a ton of guard screening that he's a part of. So I just love all the different things that he can do. And of course, he's just going to knock down every shot as a spot up shooter as well. I mean, I think maybe the one thing with Sheppard is Sheppard's a little more dynamic, maybe moving off the ball, getting his shot off from crazy angles, or working in pick and roll and rising up in the mid range to get his shot off. And maybe a little bit better of a passer, but Kon just has way more size as well. And even he's, what is he, a year and a half younger, and he's just as more effective already, I would say. And so I could see Reed being better than Kon, but it's really hard for me to say, like, Kon has been better than Reed in pretty much every way, and other than getting some steals, and he's way younger as well. So, and on a worse team.
They're about 14 months apart in age, for what it's worth. I just looked it up. I just looked it up. And so I think the argument that Kon Knueppel would be a better second best offensive player than Reed Sheppard, that's I mean, I have these guys in the same tier. It's not like I have them 6 and 7. So it's not like I have them far apart.
Okay.
I think that to me, the more important thing is, like, can you be the guy? And I think that Sheppard has just a better chance of doing that. I think it's interesting to compare them at, like, their handles and all that. Neither one of them is an overwhelming athlete. Like, there isn't that guy in this class. And Knueppel I like his defensive stylings as so far the NBA film better than Reed Sheppard. Sheppard is this, he gets the plays, but sometimes because he's a playmaker, but he has these other ones where he's going for it. It's not as extreme as at Kentucky, where he's just like leaving guys open from 3 to do it. But I think that Sheppard, there's a little bit more, but I mean, Kon Knueppel has been way better so far than Reed Sheppard has been as a pro, and he's been better than Reed Sheppard was in college. But the idea of kind of where is this game going and all that type of stuff is really interesting. And so, yeah, I mean, I have these guys both in the same tier with a couple other on-ball guys we can discuss, but I kind of led this conversation, so we can go to whoever else somebody wants.
Well, just quickly on those two guys, I could see the argument that the top 5% outcomes for both those guys, Sheppard, could be higher, that he's just a little bit more dynamic, whereas Kon is just like Sheppard is just doing more spectacular things on the floor and is capable of that, whereas Kon is just generally going to be more consistent. But, you know, ultimately, I had to respect what Kon is doing too much.
I think Shep's handle is also pretty limited for his size, and that's the thing that could stop him from being like a crazy usage guy.
Let's go back. Let's hit some of these development scores here. Duren, I think you got to put him at like an 8. Just how much better he's gotten.
Yeah, definitely an 8. Year. If I consider a 9, but he hasn't gotten that much better defensively, so I'll go an 8.
Yeah, he took a big step forward defensively last year. John, what about Sheppard for you in a development?
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be a 7 or 8, right? I mean, compared to where he looked last year, or even in summer league, right?
Well, I mean, last year he was pretty much unplayable. So I think now, if he had just been on the Charlotte Hornets last year, then he would have played. He still would have played. Yeah, he would have looked a lot better probably by the end of the year. But yeah, I mean, I think I'd have to give him like an 8 or a 9. John, you want to take the next one here?
Yeah, 10th guy on my list. I'm willing to debate this a little bit, but I think we got to give Keyonte George his flowers, man. Like, he can really shoot. He's looks like a fairly legitimate point guard. He's still only 22. Like he's really good. He's clearly Utah's second best player, right? Like without a doubt.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem that crazy to say like in 2 or 3 years he could be in an all-star game.
That's interesting. What do you think, Danny? You've followed Keyonte George. You were really high on him as a rookie. He was one of your most disappointing players a year ago, and now he's had a huge breakout.
He's shown a lot of growth in some really important ways. And I was always intrigued by him just kind of being able to get into the paint, but he's grown a lot as a finisher. 45% on twos last year, 51% this year. And some of that is, the Jazz, they're more consistently playing shooters, though Will Hardy's always like that when he had it. And he's getting to the line a lot more. And so the idea that Keyonte George, who I mentioned before that I have Sheppard and Knueppel 6'7". I have Keyonte George 8. Like he's right here, this potential lead guard role. And George is also the worst defender of those three. But I think he's the idea that he can be the best offensive player, the second best on a good offense. I think we're already kind of seeing that with the Jazz. But to be the best, I think that the building blocks are there. And like I'd give him a development score of probably an 8. Because and maybe even a 9, because he's gotten so much better offensively, more of a complete player. His finishing is better. He's taking better shots, which is extremely important. And those are all, and I think he's really grown as a passer. It was never a huge demerit for me. If I had thought he was the worst passer, I wouldn't have been pushing him as hard as I was his rookie year. But I think that he's not an overwhelming athlete, and his handle isn't like preposterous, but he does everything well enough, and he's improved enough that I believe he could be that.
Yeah, to me, George, I had him 15th, although again, I think, and I did cut the tier off at probably 9 or 10 with some other guys that I have way above him that we're going to talk about here. I think it's ultimately, for me, he's just a 6'3" guard, and I don't think he's going to ever be one of the best offensive players in basketball. And I think he is someone, part of why I liked him initially was that I felt he could be pretty solid in every area, shooting off the dribble, shooting off the catch, driving, passing. He's gotten to the foul line really well also. And he hasn't, the defensive numbers in his career have been atrocious, but he has the size to not be a total liability there either. So I think there are definitely some other guys that I want to talk about. I think just George at 22, I'm not going to say he's fully formed. He's taken a great step forward this year, but I still question the upside there a little bit. Like, yeah, it wouldn't shock me if he made an all-star team and continued to get better. Like I like how he's developed, but I guess I still see more upside in some of these other guys. Did you want to talk a little bit more about George, John, or should we move on?
We can move on.
All right, I'll go next here. Yeah, you said you said that we've said all of your top 10 already, John?
We have said all of my top 10. Yes.
So the guy that we haven't talked about, I actually have 2 guys in my top 10 that we haven't talked about yet. One of them is Alex Sarr, who I have number 9. Ooh. That rounds out my tier 4, along with Harper, Duren, Knueppel, and Banchero. And I'm just really excited by what he's been doing on both sides of the floor, particularly defensively. And some of the contest numbers are ridiculous. Now, he needs to improve his pre-positioning, but he also is contesting 44% of opponent shots around the rim and allowing only 52% shooting. And the Wizards, who are a terrible defense overall, are much better when he's on the floor. I think you put more around him and he could look really good. His raw shot blocking is awesome. But then he also, unlike some of these guys, has the ability, I think, eventually to play any coverage. And then offensively, he's moved into a new era now where he's able to catch and finish a lot better, make plays off the short roll. He's just so much better finishing around the basket than he was a year ago. He's gotten stronger. He's more comfortable generally. I still think his 3-ball is not going to ever be elite, but I think it'll come around at some point. He's at 37% this year. He shot it pretty well over the second half of last year. So I think that's going to ultimately be a weapon for him. He's at 3.9 per 36. So that's right on that center Mendoza line of really having to get guarded, but he also can make plays off of that as well if he gets closed down. So I don't think he's ever going to be someone that is a top 2 offensive player on your team, but I think he just is going to fit on any team. I think he has the potential to be a top 5 defensive player at some point in his career, and he'll be able to play the 4 or the 5 eventually if Washington ever got another 5 that was worth playing next to him. He hasn't even really ever played next to a real 4, having to play 5. But he's been thrown to the wolves a lot, and I think he's, despite that, really developed exceedingly well. So I just think like he has a very high floor and someone who is just going to be a part of winning teams because of the way that he can do so many things and fit into so many different ways to play, so many different types of lineups.
I wasn't sure what to do with Alex Sarr. There's a little bit of concern when you're watching guys put up numbers on an atrocious team and the efficiency isn't that great, that it's just because sort of somebody has to take the shots and kind of get the points. And a lot of times your opponents aren't even, don't even have their foot on the pedal. I worry a little about his hands still. He's still not that much of a rebounder, for instance. He's definitely improved, though. The 3-ball, like you said, I mean, the percentages have gone way up. He's actually taken fewer than a year ago. I still worry a little about like kind of that side spin on it. But he's definitely like, because he can do different things. So there are different areas he can grow because of that. And it's going to be really interesting to me to see him with Trae Young, because can he be a rim runner and get a lot of like alley-oop dunks and make those catches and finishes on those plays? Because he could be really potent if so. So that's kind of the next thing I'm watching with him.
Yeah, well, that'll be a fascinating thing to track next year when Trae Young makes his Wizards debut.
And Sarr versus Duren is a fascinating conversation. By the way, both of those guys will be eligible for this list next year. And so we'll probably be relitigating this to some degree, though I think it'll be clarified. And Sarr, like, I think he has the building blocks to be a more complete version of the center that Nate and I and John to a degree that we really like, of the like defensive kind of him alone type of player potentially. But also, Nate, your point about him potentially playing power forward is fascinating. Like that he has the athleticism to kind of do that. Now he needs the offensive game to get there, but it's getting there. And I mean, Sarr deserves a lot of credit. Now you're going from a low, but 48% true shooting last year to 57% this year. Now 57% is still below the positional average, but it's a lot healthier than it was. And that's despite, taking through threes, but it might be helping it a little bit. And so Sarr's grown a lot, like I'd give him a development score probably in about the 8 range. I mean, it's wild that for stretches this year, he had that largest offensive role of any Wizard, which Alex Sarr should not have, but that's also an indictment of everything else. So I have, as I said, I have a big group. Both Sarr and Duren are in that group. I think the next, unless you have more to say on Sarr, Nate, I think the next conversation, we can kind of talk about 2 guys potentially together who might be conspicuous to some by their absences in the conversation so far. They're both, to me, defense first perimeter players with some offensive upside, and that would be Stephon Castle and Amen Thompson.
Yeah, John, talk on Amen, because you've been higher on him, I think, than just about anybody. And I was surprised to not hear him be in your top 10.
I originally had him in my top 10, and then I kind of kept moving him down because I just couldn't get myself past the fact that this might be what he is. And the longer we go without any real shooting development, the more we get to a place where like, okay, that's just what you are then. And I mean, it's fascinating because like he shifted from power forward to point guard with no problem at all, right? Like how many guys can do that? And that's a real feather in his cap. He's still obviously an awesome defensive player. Anything in the paint, he's so athletic and a lot of trouble there. And he's actually shooting 80% from the line this year. So there is some benefit there, but when I started asking myself what he has to do to end up in a All-Star game, plus let alone multiple All-Star games, like I think his ceiling's really high as a really good player, just because he's so crazy athletic and can handle the ball and pass and stuff. But most of these guys that we're talking about are option 1 or option 1B, or maybe a second option at worst. And as like a 4th option, like the comparison is just so hard for him without the shooting piece coming around.
Yeah, Thompson, to me, there was hope that, oh, maybe it's a blessing that Fred VanVleet got hurt, blessing in disguise, because now he's going to get a chance to play point guard. And they kind of started doing it that way. They also started with the double big lineup. And I think it was pretty truly obvious that no, he probably needs to still be hanging out in the dunker spot more. And he could be a nice weapon in transition, but just the 2-point shooting has not been particularly dominating. There's a thought that maybe he could just succeed in the way that Russell Westbrook did, right? He's just so athletic and so powerful. It doesn't matter that he's not going to have a jump shot. And he'll take some floaters. He'll take some shots around the free throw line. Maybe his 3-pointer is just never going to work. That's my operating assumption at this point. But the fact that he shoots okay from the foul line, like maybe he can make some mid-rangers and that'll be enough if he's going to be an on-ball player or play some pick and roll with Sengun. But also, like, okay, what does he do when a center switches onto him, right? He can't really do anything in that circumstance. And he has not been just quite as dominating and physical as an off the dribble. You know, if you compare his driving to someone like a Denny Avdia, for example, where you would think, hey, he's got some similar physical tools to him, but he's just, you know, not quite, even though he's more athletic, he's just not quite as good at getting to the basket. And maybe if you gave him the ball every time, that would change. And the other thing we got to mention too is that he's probably the best deep perimeter defender in basketball, and he's playing a totally different role this year because he's not really contesting at the rim anymore because they got KD now. So he's basically playing totally on the perimeter, but still the on-off numbers are crazy for him on defense. To me, he's the one perimeter player that I would even consider right now for a top 5 in defensive player of the year. So like, he's actually that good. So that's of course a huge component of it as well. But yeah, certainly, and he's on a winning team. Like Ime Udoka plays him 37 minutes a game. He doesn't really seem to get hurt very much. Like so those, but yeah, I agree with you, John. I'm not sure the offensive upside, being an all-star level offensive player. I'm not gonna say the ship has sailed, but you're hoping to see more progress in that area with VanVleet out this year.
The ship hasn't sailed, but it's in the water and they're untying the knots right now. So it could be getting there pretty soon. And Amen, it's not always the jump shot for all these guys, but Amen Thompson, just because I was looking it up, he has taken 142 shots 10 feet and beyond this year. He's made 28% of those. That is way too low. And that's being weighed down by the 20% from 3 on the season. And so I actually have Amen below Stephon Castle at this point, which is surprising considering how differently I felt about them as prospects. And some of that is a testament to how much Stephon Castle has grown as a player. And it's not the jump shot where Stephon Castle has gone. He has shown me a lot as a passer, as a more consistent driver, as a 2-point finisher. And so I don't think that Stephon Castle, I mean, he's a very good defender. I don't think he's at Amen Thompson's level because I don't think anyone is as a perimeter defender. And even perimeter defense is more of a young man's game. That's my operating theory. And Amen's only 23. Castle's this age 21 season. But to me, the margin between those guys, both now and moving forward as an offensive player, like I think Castle, if I had to bet on which guy could be a lot better than they are now as an overall offensive player, like that, I'm betting on Castle a vast majority of the time. I think that he's shown more growth. His passing is there. I like his mentality more than I like Amen Thompson's mentality. And they both, Amen Thompson has had such a long time knowing he's a wonderful prospect. He's been a great player for a long time, knowing what his weakness is, and it hasn't gotten better. That makes me think that it's there. And like Stephon Castle, I think he still has a little bit more time. So like I'm much more willing to write off Amen as a jump shooter. And I'm more willing to bet on Stephon Castle if both of them are non-shooters as an offensive player, because he's already shown more stuff to me.
John, what's your thought on Stephon Castle? Again, another guy who you correctly, I think, have been higher on than me and Danny over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I had him 7th. I just think he's done a lot as an on-ball player, even without having the 3. And I think his 3 is not so broken that you can discount him at developing that.
It's pretty broken. It's at 27%. And he's taken 4.5 per 36, but yeah, I mean, it definitely is something that teams want him shooting. But I will say that the 2 things that I would say, actually 3 things that I was too low on him. And number 1, I thought he was going to be a solid defensive player. And I think he's actually one of the best on-ball defenders at this point, who really is going to give most guys a lot of trouble. Like, he's not a great playmaker, but obviously they have other guys who can play make behind him. on that team. So that was one. The other one is just his point guard skills have just gotten way better. And he still does turn it over a ton, right? Like even now, certainly the tide has lifted all boats on Stephon Castle, including mine. I'm still probably lower than a lot of people because of the shooting, because people remember the good games. They missed the 5 of 14 with 5 turnovers that he's going to throw on pretty often. But still, his handle is way better. And then just his ability to set guys up, particularly at the rim. He's got 18% passing creation, that's like very, very good number for a point guard. And he just is able to get in the lane. His handle is really good. And he's playing with good role threats. But still, I think that's something that maybe separates him from Amen, at least a little bit, is he's just able to get to his spots, even though he can't shoot, and he can work around in tight areas and then throw that alley-oop as well, which he's easily the best guy on the team. He's one of the best alley-oop passers in the league already. So those three things, like the shooting has been, if anything, worse than I thought it would be in the NBA, but he just has been solidly better in all three of those areas than I thought. And I guess I just still, my operating assumption is the shooting is not going to come around, but you also do have to account for that possibility. I also just don't think he's ever going to be, because he's not going to be a great off the dribble shooter or anything. He's not going to be someone you're really giving the ball to that much, but he also really defends at that position too. So that may, and the way he's been able to play with Harper and with Fox, like that's alleviated some of my concerns, to be sure. So yeah, I do wonder though, as far as having him in the top 10 of just if he doesn't shoot, that still is a problem when you're talking about that level of upside.
Sure.
Who else have we not talked about yet, John, from your list?
All right. A couple of guys that I flagged as like, hey, this is really interesting. They're probably not in the top 10. We should talk about them. One of them is Derik Queen from New Orleans, who, depending on the night you see him, either looks like the next Jokic or like nothing at all. It's definitely been like his good games have been really good. And there's definitely like some skill there. He's also a negative defender, still needs to get in better shape. He's actually in dramatically better shape than he was a year or two ago, if you followed his trajectory into the draft, but still needs to get way better in that front. Not a great athlete, doesn't really have a three ball yet, but there's a skill to him that's really intriguing.
And he's been better than people would have thought of defensively so far. Like it hasn't been just totally terrible on defense in terms of his rim protection. He's never going to be great there, but I think, he's at least is contesting shots reasonably well. What are your thoughts on Queen, Danny? I will say that I had him more in like the 15 to 20 range.
I have a group of like, I call it not worthy now, but the real potential to make a future list. And I think Queen fits in that because it's a hard like whole peg to hit, but if you're great enough offensively, and his teammate Zion Williamson did it, then you can make it happen. Queen intrigues me as a passer, kind of as an offensive player that you have to really set resources to deal with. So I think he has the possibility of doing that. But the problem is, if Derik Queen is any less than that, then it becomes a major problem because he's not a great defensive player. Yeah. He kind of doesn't have a position there, and he's not a consistent enough shooter. And so for me, Derik Queen is going to be somebody who has to prove it before I kind of move him to there are some people who I'm inherently skeptical of because they have to be at that level. And then there's some that I'm inherently positive towards because like, oh, well, they can get there. Like I would say Jalen Brown was kind of the other end of that. I'm like, oh, well, he's a wing and he might be able to figure it out. So I'll give him the latitude. With Queen, it's like, when you prove it, I'll give it to you, but you need to prove it.
Yeah. So I think, again, I just wonder about, is he going to be a top 10 offensive player in basketball? Is that what we're talking about? I can't quite get there yet. I mean, there have been these crazy flashes, but yeah, like John noted, it's easy to forget the games where he doesn't do anything and just assume that 5 years from now he'll just be having the great games all the time.
I mean, I saw him play one of those 2 days ago in Atlanta when like the Pelicans had nobody else available, and he just wasn't there. Like, yeah.
How about VJ Edgecombe?
He was the next guy I want to talk about. I had him third on my board coming into this year. I think he's potentially a really dynamic offensive player. Right now, he projects more as a volume guy, which is why I couldn't quite get him in the top 10. Where is it, is there going to be kind of elite efficiency there? Or is he the guy I've always compared him to a little bit is Victor Oladipo, where he can get to the point where he's a good offensive player and his quickness is enough of a weapon on defense that it overall makes him really valuable. But you're not guaranteed that you're getting that, right? That's kind of the thing you're projecting towards. And can he get beyond being that level of guy? I'm not sure.
There's a lot to really like about VJ Edgecombe, and I was focused more, and you were closer to the pin, at least as I would acknowledge it right now, on Edgecombe, John, than I was, because I could see the vertical athleticism, but I wondered how it was going to apply and really make as much of a difference. But he does, and that a lot of that is effort and everything else, and so that's one strength that is already translated. I believe that will translate for the rest of his career. Also, his jump shot is a lot further along, but the things, kind of like you mentioned, like I give him a lot of respect. I don't have him in the top 10 now. Very well could next year. Is that, well, what is he going to do on ball? And then the other one, and Nate and I have talked about this a lot over the course of the year, is just like, he's, for a guy who's as athletic as VJ is, he's not effective from two. And that's really dragging down some of his overall efficiency. And so it's, okay, what can he do on ball? And then how does he become like a more effective, keep the strengths and then make the weaknesses a little bit toned down? He could do it, but generally speaking, for me, if you're the sales pitch for a guard who's off ball is they're going to need to be a monster 3-point shooter. They're going to need to be a defensive beast. And I think Edgecombe has the ability to do those things, but it's more of a possibility than a certainty.
Yeah, another guy who the rising tide has lifted him in everyone's eyes, but I'm still lower on him than the consensus. I had him at number 12 in this fifth tier. And I guess I just wonder about exactly what one thing he's going to be so awesome at to reach all-star level. But when a guy is really athletic and also is playing this well at age 20 and contributing to winning, and he's already fixed his biggest deficiency, which was making threes, and he looks just very confident with that, shooting 38%, 6.1 per 36. Like, I think he could make himself into a quality shooting option as a 2, which is a shooting position, and then all the other stuff that he throws in. I hear you, Danny, on the handle, passing, finishing at the rim. Like, is he really going to be your on-ball engine? And maybe not, but then he also is giving you a lot on the defensive end and in transition, fits into the modern game very well. So I think some might argue like, hey, he should be higher at this point. But I think I'm kind of splitting the difference on that, because I do have to respect that he's worked really hard. He's considered a great character guy. He is very athletic, and he has already gotten better in some of the main thing that I was worried about with him has already been fixed. I want to throw another name out there here.
Okay.
This guy is the last guy we haven't talked about who is in my top 15. That's Cedric Coward.
Yep. He was the next guy I was going to bring up too.
Go for it, Danny.
So Coward, who, he had this unusual itinerant college career, went to Eastern Washington and Washington State, where he barely played less than 200 minutes. So he wasn't a player that I was familiar with at all coming into the league. And I've been very impressed with his overall game. He can do a lot inside the arc already. He can kind of get to spots. He also can be, at times, I'd be interested to see John's thoughts on this as a rebounder. I've been very impressed with him overall as a rebounder, like defensive class for a guy his size. And then his jumper hasn't, the numbers on it aren't great yet, but it looks good to me, and he has shot well in the past. So I think that he's, you brought up he's a guy in your top 15. I'm still considering putting Cedric Coward in my top 10. He's right at that periphery. It's a very fluid group with me. But Coward, the combination of being kind of like wing sized, having potentially a credible jump shot, and then having the inside the arc game, it's a wonderful combination of skills.
To me, offensively, he's a little bit like like TJ Warren with more of a 3 that like he can really finish, but he's also a good shooter. He's going to shoot better than 32.9. I guarantee you that. Like he could shoot.
Yeah. Yeah, he's at 85% from the foul line right now.
The thing with him, like I just don't see where he becomes an on-ball creator. Like I just think his handle's kind of really high and loose. Like I just don't think he's ever going to be that guy. He's going to be a really efficient secondary option. And he's probably going to add some defense on top of that. So like really good for where they picked him, right? But like he's already 22 compared to some of the other guys. That takes him down a peg too, obviously. I just don't see where he becomes a first or second option because I just think the handle is too limiting.
If he became, let's say, a slightly better offensive and slightly worse defensive version of OG Anunoby, is that a top 10 player on this list?
I think, yeah, I think these other guys we're talking about, we're all banking on being better players than OG Anunoby. Like we're talking about these guys because they can be kind of multiple time all-stars.
Yeah. Yeah, but
maybe they won't get there. Like Coward's floor is higher than a lot of these guys because he's a pretty good player already, but he's also 22. Like he's sort of supposed to be.
Well, think about it this way too. When we're talking about multiple time all-stars, like OG Anunoby would have way more of a trade market right now than many multiple time all-stars.
What are you saying? This Trae Young slander must end.
Or John Morant. I guess LaMelo has only made one all-star team. But yeah, I think, and I do think there's a little bit more upside here just because like guys who have that physical profile and are already playing at a very solid starting wing level at this age. And he also, compared to say someone like Mikal Bridges, he's also is strong and he has a big wingspan. Like you could see him maybe physically overwhelming guys a little bit more. And I agree, like maybe he's not going to be line the pins up and knock him down, pick and roll ball handler. But I do think he could find a way to create a lot of shots in transition. He will be great in Memphis' system there and driving from the second side, or, maybe I could even see him becoming a good enough shooter that he could come off some screens and shoot a little bit too. I think he'll be someone who is going to have a usage rate in the low 20s and could be pretty efficient doing it. And he'll be, the wing defender that you want. Now, I just haven't, he's the one thing you would say is he's not, a nuclear athlete for this player type, but he also has more length and strength than a lot of players like that too. So a lot of this is about position. There hasn't been anything that's just so spectacular about him yet, but like these sorts of players who are good are just always really in demand. Like these guys are going to just get $40 million contracts, $35 million contracts going forward. And I think my ranking kind of reflects that reality, even if he's not the conception of what a quote unquote all-star is supposed to be. He might be more valuable than some all-stars because you can duplicate what those all-stars are doing at 90% of it in a way that you can't with someone who has the skill sets that he is going to have on the wing, we hope.
We don't have the time for the full conversation, but I think there's a fascinating juxtaposition between Cedric Coward and Paolo Banchero. Paolo Banchero is only 10 months older than Cedric Coward, so they're actually closer in age than some might think, but Paolo has been on the mix for a long time. And I think the idea that Paolo Banchero could be a better number one offensive option, yeah, of course, I'll acknowledge that. But I think that Cedric Coward already has the game to be a better number two offensively than Paolo Banchero. And they're different strengths defensively. They're not the same player. But I think and the other thing with Coward is we don't know what his rate of improvement is going to be because he hasn't really had that opportunity. But Paolo Banchero, like we mentioned briefly, like I would give him a development score of like a 2. And so that doesn't mean that he's going to get a 2 every year moving forward. But like Cedric Coward is another bite at that apple. So like I have those players pretty close. I think that it's very fascinating. Like there's a clear argument that Paolo has more upside. He's a more physically dominant person. But I think Cedric Coward's like his skill level now and like the game that he has, there's a better chance that he reaches his potential than what we've already seen from Paolo Banchero.
So we're getting close to being finishing. Oh yeah, sorry, John, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing Coward getting to be a 2. That's probably the biggest thing that holds me back.
I don't think so either.
Probably a 3 or 4, but yeah.
So let's do this then. We're almost out of time. give me each of you. We'll just go in a circle and we'll talk maybe for 30 seconds about each of them. We've talked about 16 players so far. Give me the next guy that you think has the best chance of being an all-star.
Ajay Mitchell.
Ajay Mitchell. That is very interesting.
Last year of eligibility on the list, but he is eligible.
Okay, John, you got 30 seconds. That's a tall order to explain that in 30 seconds.
He just goes downhill and scores all the time against anybody.
Yeah.
And his finishing is really good. He's gotten a lot better with his right hand already. I just think he's been so comfortable at the NBA level coming up from the Big West. It's like been shocking. So yeah, like if he ended up being traded from OKC or signed on another team, like could he average 25 a game and, for the expansion, Las Vegas, whatever's like, yeah.
All right, don't let KP listen to this and know that you said expansion Las Vegas instead of Seattle. Yeah, no, he was probably just outside of my list. Maybe it's just him being 23. There's a lack of perceived upside there.
Yeah,
for me, but he also plays two ways. He can shoot it okay. Like, yeah, if he gets his own team, like it wouldn't shock me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Danny, who's next for you? Would you have had Mitchell in that spot or someone else?
I would not have Mitchell. I love Ajay Mitchell, but I wouldn't have had him in that spot. I want to briefly, before I get to my guys, say, unfortunately, Zach Edey, just with the injuries, like you could make it. I mean, he is eligible for this list. Like the way he played for the 13 games he played, he would be there. So mine, I'd be torn between Ace Bailey and Kyshawn George. I think both those guys have different cases. So Kyshawn George has grown a lot as an offensive guy, and I love him as a defensive playmaker. He showed that a lot last year. But then Ace Bailey just has the building blocks that I really like. He's a wing. He's strong. I think he can be a capable defensive player. And we've already seen some of the idea that he doesn't have to take the shots he took at Rutgers, that getting him out of that world will be better for him. So I think Ace Bailey, I love these kind of number 2 option wings more than I think most people do, but I think he could be that guy.
Yeah, Bailey was up there for me too. Edey was up there for me as well. Those would have probably been my next two. Collin Murray-Boyles is another one where I realize he's probably always going to be the offense you're going to have to work around and so on. But this guy to me is the closest thing I've seen to Draymond Green since Draymond Green. And there have been a lot of next Draymonds that have come through these parts and have not delivered. And I would say that Murray-Boyles does. Their offense is bad when he's on the floor. They're going to have to figure out a place for him. But he can pass. I think his finishing will get a little bit better. Shooting will probably never happen. But their defensive rating when he's on the floor is absolutely ridiculous. 106.4. And despite the fact that they have a 108 offensive rating, he's still positive. And especially if he can calm down the fouling a little bit, he's still only 20 as well. I think he could be one of the best defensive players in basketball. So he deserves a mention there, even if the offense is a little wonky.
Nate, has Collin Murray-Boyles officially gotten the Nate's guy moniker, or is he kind of outside of that?
I mean, he can't be a Nate's guy if he's a top 10 pick though. There has to be some relevant or some feeling of plucking him from relative obscurity. All right, John, who's next for you?
Next guy for me would probably be Jeremiah Fears. Just he's so young. He sucks right now, but he's so young, and there's clear talent there with his burst and ability to break down defenses, score, get to the rim. He has to get a lot better. But rookie point guards get their asses kicked. That's what happens. So I still think there's a chance here.
Yeah, I love his skill level. I really liked him in the draft, and I thought he was the right pick at 7. But I'm also just not. I'm just out on small guards. He's shown a lot. I love watching the guy. Not sure about his shooting. His defense has actually been better than I would have expected, but it was so bad in college. But he's too small. Guys are just going to go right through him. That's just the NBA today. That's why I would not have necessarily had him there. A couple other names probably people want us to talk about. Modest Buzelis would be one of those, I'm sure, at age 21, the Bulls.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on him?
I'm not sure if his offense is going to come around to the level where he can be in the discussion with some of these other guys we talked about. The shooting piece has been inconsistent. The on ball decision making, it kind of comes and goes. He's had some monstrous dunks in transition, obviously. Defensively, there's a lot of potential, like secondary rim protector with his size, and he could still move. Like, there's a lot to like there. I think he'd end up being one of the top 3 or 4 players from that draft, potentially, which is a little bit damning with faint praise, but still. But yeah, I mean, he's interesting for sure.
Yeah, certainly someone who could emerge into this group to be even in the top 10. But he was kind of in the next group down to me. What about for you, Danny?
I think just for the sake of completeness, we probably have a continent that's apoplectic for us that we haven't mentioned either Josh Giddey or Dyson Daniels in this conversation so far. Josh Giddey currently averaging almost 20 points a game. He's at 19 points per game and has grown as a player. But I think the reason why he hasn't come up, even though Giddey has grown a lot, and this is age 23 season, so he's still eligible, is that he is a better version of the same player, which is that he elevates you to like a decent to a pretty good defense or offense, and then he's not that great at defense. But like, I think we have to acknowledge that Josh Giddey's still eligible for this list, and like he is producing on a team. I'm not going to say a successful team because that depends on the game for the Bulls.
What about Kel'el Ware?
I can't do that.
No. Is it like a mentality thing for you, or?
I just don't think he's good enough to be in this discussion.
Okay. I mean, did you see him as just kind of like a starter? I mean, he's shooting 43% on threes right now, and pretty big shot blocker, 64% true shooting, can play inside or out. Not great moving his feet defensively, but he has very good shot blocking. At least fundamentals. I shouldn't say fundamentals, but he's got a great standing reach. He can jump.
Does he have an assist yet this year?
I don't know. You sure you're not looking at Yinka Dare or Hassan Whiteside?
I'm joking. Yes, 21.
Yeah.
But
yeah. No, I there's just a lot of raw building blocks there. I wouldn't have him in my top group either, but yeah, I think there's really a lot of depth to this group this year. Maybe not as much just like crazy upside as we've seen before beyond Wembanyama and Flagg.
One other guy we should probably at least mention, because he's only played 2 games this year, is Jalen Green, his last year on the list.
Okay. He's mentioned. Let's move on. So Scoot Henderson also has been mentioned. Yeah, I mean, they're just to shout out a few guys. I mean, there are a lot of guys. Sarr Thompson and Anthony Black is really coming on.
Yep.
Shaedon Sharpe hasn't been efficient, but he still has been creating shots. He's still only 22. I still like Ron Holland is someone who I think he's only 20, right? He's been a winning player and plays a valuable position. Brandon Miller, you have to kind of have given up on him for now until he really proves he can be more of a winning player, make more shots than he has. So Zachary Risachet, Trey Johnson, like there are a lot of really good players that I wanted to shout out at least a little bit here.
Derek Lively, healthy.
Yeah, Lively. Yeah, I mean that's I probably would rather have Zach Edey than him at this point. But so anybody that's really as you look at the overall list that we have here, any closing thoughts from you first, John, and then Danny?
Just a little disappointing how quickly it dropped off from kind of the all-star guys to the well, maybe in 3 years, kind of guys.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys in this 25 draft, but those guys they're just not fully formed yet, right? I mean, there are a lot of guys with great potential, right? Like Harper, Knueppel, Edgecombe, all those guys look like they could be fantastic. And even someone like Trey Johnson, we probably didn't talk about enough so far. So I think Coward is another guy in this 25 draft. I mean, that comprises like 7 of the spots on this list, along with Flagg.
Yeah.
But
well,
there are fewer. Yeah.
It's going to be pretty fun to do this next year when we have the 26 rookie crop in here too.
Yeah. Yeah, because 22 and 23, not really that great of drafts overall right now. Like I think even like Holmgren and Sengun at like 3 and 4 was kind of our consensus. That's not really that sexy to me for that level on this list. But
100%.
we could just be, I think there are going to be guys who are going to emerge from that 25 draft over the next bit. And also let's remember too, sometimes like Denny Avdija was not even remotely being talked about by any of us last year, his last year of eligibility, and now he's going to make the All-Star team this year probably. So the guys can emerge past our window. Danny, do you have anything else you want to add?
I'm very excited to see where this is a year from now, especially like the offensive engine guys. Are any of them established at that point? Because a lot of them, basically all of them, will be eligible again next year. So how are we feeling about Sheppard versus Knueppel versus Dylan Harper and all this type of stuff? Because like that's one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite things to break down when we do position rankings and everything else. And it's just not really that class right now. But some of those players, they're late bloomers. John talked very well about how rookie point guards always suck. And so some of those guys won't be rookie point guards anymore. And I want to see how that looks.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for listening. You can subscribe to every episode of Hollinger Duncan and Dunked on Prime. If you go to the link that is in the show notes, you can also get Dan Feldman's daily dunks 5 days a week in either audio or written form. You get access to our cap sheets, which will be very interesting. Those will be updated regularly throughout trade season, our free agent rankings as well. So all those things are part of the Dunked on Prime universe, and I exhort you to subscribe. We're going to have a deal coming out pretty shortly. I might even start that off this weekend to get some extra money off a year membership. If you're willing to commit to us for a year, we'll give you a great deal. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you all next time.